Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Judith Ohikwari. I am the Membership and Marketing Manager here at the Center. I'm excited to see so many of you here tonight celebrating this event with us. The Center for Fiction's annual First Novel Prize, awarded for the first time in 2006, goes to the best debut novel in a calendar year. The award's grand prize is $15,000, and each of the finalists receives $1,000. The prize is now in its 20th year, so this year's winner is our 20th. Has gone on in the past to recognize such impressive writers as Junot Diaz, Tommy Orange, Noor Naga, Ben Fountain, Deshaun Charles Winslow, and Raven Leilani. This year, we received nearly 200 nominations from publishers large and small. These were first read by our readership, a massive undertaking. Over 700 people applied to be part of our First Novel Prize readership, and over 400 went on to read and evaluate the nominated novels to help select the long list. After that, the shortlist was chosen. Yes, give it up for our readership. The shortlist was then chosen by a panel of esteemed writers and expert judges. Thank you to Xochitl Gonzalez, Adam Hazlitt, Tracy O'Neill, and last year's First Novel Prize winner, Joseph Earl Thomas. In ways unique to each of them, the 7 books being honored tonight represent a massive achievement. The First Novel Prize is awarded at a critical moment in a writer's career. It is often their publishing debut, and it always marks a milestone of artistic ambition and vision. These books also say something about the state of American letters. The only requirements for the prize, other than that the books are debuts and novels, is that their authors are American citizens or permanent residents. They all have something to say, even though they span oceans and acres, about the variety of American voices, the vitality of American life, the histories we inherit, and the futures that are still possible. The prize also tells us something about the future of literature. These novels were chosen not only for their beauty and their power, but because of what they promise. I join the judges and the center in my excitement about what is to come in these finalists' careers, and I'm happy to present them to you tonight. So before each of them reads, I'll introduce them, and each author will offer a 5-second description of their novel to stoke your curiosity. You'll get a taste of all of their different perspectives as they describe it. I'm sorry to say that Colwell Brown will not be able to join us tonight, though I encourage you to read her fabulous novel, We Pretty Pieces of Flesh, about 3 adolescent girls coming of age in a gritty post-industrial town in Yorkshire, England in the 90s. Let's give Colwell a brief round of applause. Now, our first reader will be Ricky Fain. Ricky Fain says of the devil 3 times, "The devil wants back into heaven. God don't like it, but Jesus is down." Meanwhile, Black folks laugh, love, and die in no particular order over and over again. Welcome, Ricky.
Hi, so I'll just say a little bit about where we are before I jump in. The devil has just been unjustly kicked out of heaven, and his latest attempt to get back in, the Tower of Babel, has failed. Just as the devil was in spitting distance of the pearly gates, though, God wrinkled his nose, confounded all the bricklayers, reached out from the clouds and flicked the tower down. The devil kicked around for a while after that, propping up empires and watching them fall, making waves wherever he found calm. Before long, he heard tell of God sending down his only son, which hurt the devil's feelings because even though they butted heads now and then, the devil always thought of himself as God's own. But he didn't harp on God counting him out and was ready to forgive his father's every trespass if he could just get back home. And so the devil set out to find Jesus, God's favorite son, and caught up to him in the wilderness, hunting up 4-leaf clovers, worrying the manes off dandelions, and watching the wind blow clouds about. The devil spent 40 days and 40 nights trying to reason with Jesus, brother to brother. "Jesus," the devil said, "I'm not evil, not really. How could I be? Ain't nothing in me God ain't put there. Ain't a thing in my heart God didn't smile upon. All I want is to get back home." When Jesus heard the devil's words, he wept, because Jesus real soft-hearted. especially when it comes to fathers not doing right by their sons. Jesus himself didn't hear from his real daddy until he was damn near 31. Jesus said, "Devil, you really have touched me. My wings ain't strong enough to fly us both up to heaven, but if you can hold out just a little bit longer, I'll bend God's ear and see if we can't work out something." And so the devil bided his time for a few more eons, making bargains here, turning a soul or two away from God there, but his heart wasn't ever really in it. When he just about lost all faith in Jesus, Jesus came to the devil in a dream. "I've been working overtime on God," Jesus said, "and still he ain't budged. I'll keep after it, but in the meantime, I need you to help me. You heard about what's happening in Africa?" The devil said he hadn't. Jesus said, "They're robbing up black folks from there and working them to death in America." "Huh," the devil said. "Ain't that something?" But he was only half listening. No human suffering could rival his own. All the devil took from Jesus' words was that Jesus had yet to find him a way home. Jesus hauled off and blackhanded the poor devil. Plap! "Listen to me," Jesus said. "It is something, and you the somebody who needs to fix it." "Ain't that God's problem?" the devil asked, trying to rub some feeling back into his cheek, wondering what on earth had turned his sweet baby brother so evil mean. You'd think Jesus huffed, but he's up in heaven twiddling his thumbs. He says all humans are one race, acting like he can't see color from his gold throne. The devil was struck dumb. He ain't never once in his life imagined Jesus would fix his mouth to talk wet about God. And if you were struck too, then the joke's on you. Because if ain't but one thing in this world true, it's that Jesus loves him some black folks and black folks love them some Jesus. It's like they're the hand and he's the thumb, and he gets powerful angry when he sees them done wrong. "Go south," Jesus told the devil. "Free my people and watch out for them until I return. You do this for me, and I promise that one day I'll find a way to get you home." And when the devil woke, that's just what he did and is, even now, still trying to do. That's why black people have to go through hell to get free. And how come to this day, the devil won't leave them be? Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we are going to welcome Justin Hayes. Justin writes of Ibis. It's a Hitchcockian bedtime bird story. Bad boys, good girls, lost mothers, cold lagers, and a warm Caribbean rum punch across centuries. Welcome, Justin.
Hello. Thanks for being here, and of course, as always, thank you to the Center for Fiction. This section is by a mother, a Venezuelan mother. Her name is Gracia, and she's writing to her daughter about her first trip off Venezuela, and how she met her daughter's father. And she's also talking about her brother Manuel, who's Venezuelan and a fisherman. "Beware any man who'll take your teeth," a tipsy Manuel warned me a few nights as he downed a lager and gutted a carried fish on the counter that he'd brought home for Alima to fry. He was shirtless and thinner than ever, and his eczema was acting up. He'd spent most of the weekend sleeping off his Friday hangover, and he was still angry at Hubert, who he still hadn't met. I wondered at the true cause of this ache. "When do I get to meet this pervert?" he asked. "When you're sober," I snapped. "Leave her alone," Alima said as she set the table. "Let her find her own way." But she didn't see what I saw. Didn't know Manuel like I did. Didn't know that the linchpin that held my brother's sanity together had been slipping free of its hold since my arrival on the island, and now it seemed to be entirely removed. In the time that I'd been on the island, I'd grown afraid of Manuel. He'd been growing frustrated due to limited catches, and his absences made me wonder. But not Alima. "Let's smoke some of the sensi," she suggested after dinner, holding up an impressively full sandwich bag of weed. "Mila, there's nothing that pushes two people together like disapproval from their families. I'll be honest, your father never lied to me. I knew that he was still married. His wife a socialite from a wealthy Creole family. He loved his son, but he doted on his grandson, Peter called Peter, a teenager readying for college. Then he told me something awful, that he told his son, Basil, about me, Peter's father, when he'd arranged for the passport and he disapproved of us." "You told him about me? About us? How did you think he'd respond?" I pushed him in his chest, which had no effect. He would explain that he and his wife had long been estranged and had long contemplated divorce and knew that Basil understood that. She's still his mother, I said. He'd explained the divorce's eventuality, but Basil had surprised him, had grown furious, had called him an old fool. What did you think he'd say? I shouted. He pulled me into a hug, smothering me with cologne. But it turned out this was less of a concern than Manuel. One night the following week, Manuel returned home delirious and flushed with both bolivares and island money. He threw them up in the air and danced a little two-step as the cash floated down. Alima didn't hide her suspicion. Like me, she knew no fish that he caught would yield that kind of return. She confronted him. Are you smuggling? He laughed, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Manuel, she said, look at me. But he wouldn't. He just kept laughing. She slapped him hard across the cheek. He grabbed her shoulders and shook her. Let me go, she said. The temperature plummeted. I called Hubert. 10 minutes later, he was there, and I slipped out, while Alima and Manuel screamed at each other. I spent my first night with Hubert at his house in New Felicity Village. It didn't take long to learn how Manuel had earned the money. It was in the local newspaper a few days later. He and his fishing crew were accused of being part of a Venezuelan kidnapping ring and had been arrested for seizing local fishermen. I returned to the apartment and showed Alima the article. She wept, and I hugged her. I didn't recognize Manuel's grainy picture. He'd been beaten until his eyes were the size of potatoes. One cheek was swollen, the size of a planet. Alima was still shaking when I led her to the couch and gave her a glass of water. Then I called Hubert, but I couldn't string together a sensible sentence. It was as if Alima's nervous energy had transferred over to me. My mind skittered. Hubert urged me to speak slowly and explain what had happened. He grew quiet when I finally told him. I asked him to help. He said it wouldn't be easy. He knew the magistrate who would most likely oversee the case, and he was a difficult man. I was speaking softly to spare Alima. Didn't want to fill her with false possibilities. She knew who Hubert's son was. When I hung up, I told her what Hubert had said. So there's hope, she said, too nervous to sit still. I didn't want to risk going to see Manuel in jail because of my status, passport or not, but Alima went and they told her she couldn't see him. Dark circles already mapped her eyes. They never left. A few days later, the headline on the front of the newspaper read, "Kidnappers to be arraigned." It was the same grainy picture of my brother and his co-defendants, but somehow he looked different, hardened, like his hands had been handcuffed behind him the entire time that he'd been in custody, like he'd been beaten even worse, although no part of the image had changed. I tried to work at Miss Lee Fuchs, but I was too distracted. I felt as if everyone there knew about Manuel. I almost lost the tip of a finger sectioning some lamb. Late that morning, thinking about Manuel locked away, I ran to the toilet to vomit. Miss Lee squinted at me and told me to go home. I wasn't sure if she meant permanently, but I didn't return and I never received my pay for that last week's work. Of course, I was already pregnant. When I told Hubert, he was overjoyed. He said that he knew that it would be a girl and he'd always wanted a daughter and that she would be a ballerina and a poet. There was already a lawyer/politician in the family. As he settled me in the bedroom, Hubert said that the house had been in his family for a long time. Something feels strange about it, I said, testing the bed. Strange how? He looked into the room from the kitchen where he was unpacking some groceries that he'd picked up on the way. I couldn't explain it. I ran my hand over the bedsheet. I touched the cords around my neck. He closed the fridge, then came into the bedroom, sat beside me, rubbed my neck. At first, it was lovely. Hubert spent days with me, caring for me, cooked, put on a radio station that only played songs by The Mighty Shadow, The Mighty Penguin, and by Bob Marley. He turned it up when Three Little Birds played, and he held me in his arms and danced me around the kitchen when Cry to Me came on, surprising me with his nimble feet. He opened all the windows, and the wind blew through and brought the salted sea air that surprisingly calmed me. On the porch, he hung a hammock, and we lay in it together, and he read the daily newspaper to me. I told him not to spare me any news about Manuel, but there wasn't any. One morning, queasier than usual, I snapped at him. What's wrong? You have me playing house when my brother is locked away in some rat-infested island jail. You can get me an island passport, but you can't get my brother free. He looked like I had slapped him, left a mark. He remained quiet for a moment. Then he said it was clear that I needed some time to myself, and he stood up and said he was going to give me time to calm down, and then he was gone. I closed all the windows and killed the radio. He was right. I wanted to be alone. Thank you.
Next up, we have Alejandro Heredia. Loca follows a year in the life of two Dominican immigrants, Sal and Charo, as they navigate building a new life for themselves in the Bronx in the 1990s. These characters make a lot of self-destructive choices. They struggle to keep up with odd jobs at an ice cream parlor, a diner, a liquor store, a community garden, and like proper best friends, they get on each other's nerves a lot. But Sal and Charo's humanity lies precisely in their shortcomings, in their willingness to try despite their struggle. Welcome, Alejandro.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to read a scene from the novel in which two characters are having a conversation on a fire escape in the Bronx. You got to get your shit together, man. Very unlike Don Julio, getting straight to the point. I feel real bad about the rent, Sal says. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, yeah, get me my money. Pero, I mean in general, you're walking around like a zombie. I've been excavating some deep psychological rifts in my mind, Sal says awkwardly. See, that's the problem. Always thinking, using big words. I don't want to beat you while you're down. But all this thinking, look where it's gotten you. You're stuck, man. Just keep it simple. A friend of mine was murdered, I think. I know. It was some gringo from the States my friend was sleeping with. Recently, a few years ago, it's why I left Santo Domingo, even though I didn't want to. Shit. Don Julio pulls out a cigarette and puts it to his lips. What's your friend's name? Yadiel. He your friend for a long time? She, sometimes he. It's complicated. Okay, all right. I get it, I think. I can't keep up these days, but anyway, he says, is that what the dreams are about? I think so. I can never remember them, but I wake up feeling her presence, like someone's been calling my name. A ghost calling your name. I heard of that, Don Julio says. My daughter had this dream of making bread for a living. I don't know where she got it from. I think we had a neighbor that made pan de agua. We must have taken her there at some point. Anyway, it don't matter where she got it from. Point is, she wanted it real bad, her own bakery. And then, you know, the Civil War. I cried every day until I found a bottle of rum. It helped to numb the pain. I didn't meet a single night sober for a long time. Years lost. I knew something had to change. I was gonna kill myself con esa vaina. I'm not the smartest, didn't do a lot of school or any of that, but I had killed people and seen people killed, so I knew what it takes to make a life real small. Fast as a gun or slow as the rum. I knew what death smelled like, so I left. It wasn't easy here either. This country is just as bad in other ways. I was good for a little while, but eventually I picked up the habit again. Driving the cab to make some cash, and every other moment, drinking. Eventually, a buddy of mine took me to my first meeting, walked me over like I was a carajito on his way to school. I felt stupid, but he was a stand-up guy, real funny, real good with the community. I know I'm talking a lot, but just bear with me. I'm getting to the point, I'm getting there. I did a lot of shit I'm not proud of. Don't even want to tell you about how I started baking. Something else I need to repent for, someone else I hurt. I was so fixated on making amends the first time I baked, I didn't even notice. But I did it again a week later, just because I was curious. I made pound cake. The shit was all lumpy on the outside and gooey on the inside. Un monstruo of a cake, just wrong. But that's the moment. Baking that cake was the first time I really spent time with my baby. It'd been years since she died, and all that time, I hadn't sat with her once. I meet my daughter every time I turn on that oven. I've never been religious, and I'm not saying you gotta believe in God if that's not your thing. Plenty of guys at the taxi base don't believe in shit. We talk about it. I'm just saying, your friend died, and it don't seem like you ever meet him. Her, sorry, but you know what I mean. I've tried to talk about it, Sal says, but whenever I do, my mom, Chado, now Vance, everyone tells me it's not my fault, that I shouldn't carry guilt around. But that doesn't help, because I know I could have done something, been more present. She was always asking me out. I hated those parties, but I could have tried some other way to be with her. She was lonely. I wasn't paying attention. Yeah, I'm sure you could have done something, Don Julio says. He doesn't seem to notice that his words have wounded Sal. He keeps his eyes on the horizon. They went out because they were hungry, my wife and my daughter. She called me at my friend's house where we were hiding, asked me to bring food, that they were running low, but I forgot. I was too wrapped up planning the next day's battle, real macho that I was. I still remember staying up all night under a kerosene lamp, surrounded by my boys, drunk off the spirit of revolution, the kind of shit they write poems about. So macho, I forgot my wife and kid were hungry. They went out to find food a few days later, got wrapped up in a shooting. I don't even know if it was the gringos or our people that shot them. It don't matter now. A gun's a gun. People think it's the bodies you remember. And sure, that keeps you up at night. But it's the choices you make when you can make them. That's a part of war that weighs you down and kills you way after the fighting's done. You didn't kill your friend. You shouldn't blame yourself for that. But I'm not gonna coat it in sugar and frosting for you. We can always be better to the people that we love. Thank you.
Next up, we have Daryl Kinsey. Daryl writes of Natch, a hard scrabble tree man loves his ropes, but is reluctant to tie the knot. Against his better judgment, he branches out and takes a lover. It turns out falling in love is the most dangerous thing he can do. The trees are the easy part. Welcome, Daryl.
Hey, everybody. In this scene, Natch and Asha have just been to her belly dance performance, and she's still wearing her vest and her hip belt. That was the night she came to the cabin for the first time. We sat on the deck, drinking and smoking and looking for meteors. She claimed there was a shower that night and that we were supposed to be seeing 20 or 30 meteors an hour. She knew of other showers that fall that she said we should watch together. It was about 50 degrees out. She was still wearing her vest from the performance. She went back to the bedroom and looked through a pile of clothes on the floor of my closet and found a flannel shirt and a pair of yellow sweatpants. The sweatpants swallowed her. She came out pulling on the drawstrings. I was sitting in my folding chair. I told her to come stand in front of me. I lifted her shirt tail and took out her bow knot. She lowered her head and watched my hands. Her hair hung down. I could feel it sweeping over the top of my head, and I could feel the warmth of her body already soaking into the sweatpants. I put figure eights in each drawstring. I explained what I was doing. I got to talking about stopper knots and the knots I used for work. The bowline, the clove hitch, and the figure eight were my three. I told her I could take down any tree in the woods with just those 3 knots. I talked about how some guys try to learn every knot in the handbook, whereas I believed in knowing the knots you use and using the knots you know. Just tell me if I'm talking too much about knots, I said. I like listening to you, she said. I like your voice. Can I see it again? See my voice again? The figure eight again. I showed her the steps. She stood there swaying and listening and touching my hair with her fingertips. She told me to go slower. For whatever reason, we had started whispering. She said she had a question. She wondered if she would have a hard time untying the figure eight when she needed to. She wondered if she was stuck in the pants, if she would be wearing yellow sweatpants for the rest of her life. We slipped into a kind of nonsense talk. We should have stopped talking. We were talking when there was nothing else to say. I told her it wouldn't be any problem to get the knots out. We could get them out whenever she wanted. I promised her she wouldn't be wearing the pants forever. That whole month, we hardly did anything except lay around the cabin, getting to know each other. In the afternoons, we would drag a quilt into the clearing and sleep in the sun. And after we slept, she would lay on the quilt and read, and I would go to the woodpile and chop wood. I wasn't trying to chop wood in a serious way. I kept talking and trying to distract her from her reading. I didn't like it when she read. I was jealous of her books and how easily she could disappear into their pages. I talked about the wood and how wood grows. I talked about my ma. I told her about the boy with cerebral palsy who taught me the trick of setting the logs up in an old tire. She tried to ignore me for a while, then she marked her page with a blue jay feather and dropped the book on the quilt and folded her hands on the cover and looked at me. She told me to hush. She said she wouldn't believe how hard it was to read when there was an annoying person around. She made me promise to leave her alone. I stood there with my ma and watched her open her book and take the feather out. Her eyes searched the page for her place in the paragraphs. She started reading again. I watched her read. Frowns and other expressions washed across her face, and the words showed up as small twitches in her lips. I liked watching her read, but at the same time, I wanted her to quit reading. I couldn't stop looking at her. I couldn't leave her alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mariam Ramani, who writes of Liquid. Queer adjunct professor tries to marry rich, LA. Realizes her father is dying, Tehran. Sex, drugs, and third worldism. Welcome, Mariam.
I was in Tehran last week at this time, so I thought it would be appropriate to read from later in the book. Date number 92, the Eid of Sacrifice. Layli was leaning against her car when I came out, my father's gates open. She drove a Devo compact in Bing cherry red. Not the fanciest, but given import tariffs and the exchange rate, pricey nonetheless. Nowadays, a Camry sits by her studio, despite grotesque inflation, just as the pomegranate tree flourishes despite the drought. She'd left the car idling. So I see the gas subsidy is still going, I said, climbing in. What do you know about subsidies, Miss America? She shifted into first. Let's get out of the city. You like kebab? Darband in summer. A rainbow of taillights and light-up signs crest the mountainside north of Tehran, each car carting city dwellers into the crisp mountain air. Child eyes stalk street vendors through open car windows. Sour and sweet fruit leather sold by the meter, fat black mulberries, fresh walnuts fished from the jar, where they float in brine like brains suspended in the sweat of their own labor. Friends and lovers, entire families, all 4 generations, they gather on restaurant terraces laid with low plinths and plastic sofras, sitting cross-legged on weathered rugs, backs against cushions dense as stones. oil-fingered and charcoal-lipped, they suck on soda straws and shisha nibs, flirting through wisps of candy apple nicotine, trading barbs and poisons, profiting from the mountain cool, the dark. That's what you came for the night that hung over the tea houses and past the pullover parking, for the night that hid behind the neons, as indifferent to your want as to your lack. It took a solid hour to get out of the city to the foot of the Alborz Mountains. 30 minutes later, and we were scaling the main drag through Darband, Layli's hand gripping the gear shift. Up, 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 we inched in a coy progression. Passing one after another kebab house, her friends were waiting for us at one of them. My stomach growled. After the last neon and after even the afterglow had faded, just when I thought there could be no more mountain for the taking, Layli turned off the paved road. I could hear rocks clamoring under her devo. We were sure to puncture a tire at least. She flipped the headlights off. All that guided us now was the weak light of a crescent moon. Soon it became clear that Layli knew the road, and for about a minute we sailed through the darkness. But we took the next bend to see the towering grille of an SUV, and it flashed across my mind that my father and I might die in the same week. We jerked to a stop. Calmly, without honking, both cars restarted, backed up, and moved on. "Where are you taking me?" I asked. She laughed. 2 minutes, I promise. Thank you.
And last up, but certainly not least, we have Shubha Sundar, who writes of optional practical training. A young immigrant woman in Boston examines, resists, and turns inside out a straitjacket woven from 1,000 conversations. Be ready to find yourself somewhere in the fabric. Welcome.
I took the Red Line to Park Street and spotted my cousin as soon as I stepped out of the station. She was standing by one of those souvenir stalls at the edge of the common, her profile to me, bareheaded, hands pushed deep for warmth into the pockets of a thin coat. The day was bright but frigid. Snow from last week's storm was still heaped everywhere, sidewalks patched with dirty ice. She seemed to be observing with some longing the stall's woolen hats and gloves, most of them Red Sox memorabilia, and I felt protective of her, my little cousin who had never before traveled off the subcontinent, so had no conception of what it meant to be cold, whose brand new clothes, all purchased, no doubt, for the occasion of her trip to Boston, offered little insulation from the late December chill. Her shoes were shiny patent leather, and her jeans were baggy, the kind I used to wear as a teenager in Bangalore. Her voice was nearly a shriek as she greeted me, and I wondered for a moment if women's voices in India were higher than they were here. She said she felt fine, no jet lag at all. She'd slept in the Dubai airport lounge and again on the flight to Logan, and then slept until 5:30 that morning at her uncle's in Quincy. Her grin showed protruding teeth with gaps. As we walked down Tremont to the gathering point for guided tours of the Freedom Trail, I apologized for not being able to give her a place to stay. The house had spare rooms, but I'd shied from the prospect of a family member staying there. The old lady watching us with her hostile, curious gaze, my cousin's sing-song speech and her accent, much more pronounced than mine. It was the heavy Tamilian accent that even in Bangalore would have been mimicked and mocked. The landlord's sister scolding me in front of my cousin, implicating us both in the neglect of her mother, and then my cousin reporting to her parents, who'd relayed to mine, that I was living in a shabby room in a shabby American house whose owners were scary and rude, prompting my mother to call and chastise me, saying she didn't understand why I was living like a vagabond in America. Was this my long-term plan? Since we had half an hour before the next tour, I led her to a Starbucks on a side street. "Hot chocolate," she said eagerly, and I ordered 2. She uncapped her drink and licked the whipped cream off the lid. "Too good," she said, beaming. The first time she was having a proper hot chocolate. It was one of the things she wanted to make sure she tried here before going back to India. The other was pizza. She wrapped her hands around the paper cup. There were gloves and a hat in her bag, she said. She just wanted to fully feel the coldest cold she'd ever felt in her life. "Crazy," she said as she clutched her cup, still shivering but smiling, lips drawn back over her misaligned teeth, her large, lustrous eyes roving with excitement. A family friend in Chennai who'd spent many years in Canada had told her to practice for the winter by sitting in the fridge, but she suspected no refrigerator would have prepared her for cold like this. She'd never felt her hands and the tips of her ears burn with cold, hadn't known it was possible. "Crazy," she repeated. But she wanted the experience. It was part of the whole adventure of coming here. Her internship didn't begin until after New Year's, and she planned to spend the next few days just exploring and taking in the sights, because once the work started, as she'd been told by former interns, those students from her college in Chennai who'd been through the same 8-month program, she'd be spending all her time on campus, in the genetics laboratory run by the Indian professor who'd funded the bulk of her stay. It wasn't that he himself was particularly demanding. On the contrary, he had a reputation for being laid back and jovial. It was that she had to make sure she obtained some real results that she could report on when she went home in August, since, unlike her peers who would have done projects at local labs and institutions, she would be under extra scrutiny for having gone abroad. "You went to America and all, and this is what you did?" some of her predecessors had been asked during their presentations. "You were goofing off at Disney World or what?" I had no doubt at all, I said, that she'd do marvelously and make the best use of every opportunity here. I wished my own students had a fraction of her focus and drive. I thought of her mother as I said this, my uncle's wife, a mathematics lecturer who conducted private lessons at home for students preparing to take the boards, those protracted examinations administered simultaneously across the country to millions of 10th and 12th graders, which I had practiced for with her help, spending a week at their house in Chennai during the month of March, working through fat books of practice questions in the dripping summer heat, under a ceiling fan that stirred the fetid air between power outages. Despite the oppressive weather, I'd been able to concentrate for long stretches, immersed in the broth of that house, steered by my aunt's clear explanations and her kind presence. I never heard her berate my cousin in the extended ways my mother berated me. Their interaction seemed all ease and humor and affection. Seeing my cousin now on her first foray far from home, I suspected that she was eager to explore and experience, but that unlike me, she'd be happy to return home when the time came, that wherever else she went in the future, home would always be the place of her childhood. Thank you.
Keep the applause going for our finalists. Thank you. Thank you to all the wonderful readers tonight for sharing your work. It's been a real joy to have these new novels in the world, and we're honored to be part of your stories and your careers. One easy way to support these writers, everyone in the auditorium, is to visit our bookstore tonight, this evening. You're already here. Buy the books from all our first novel finalists. There are signed copies ready and waiting for you to take home. To get involved and also support all the work we do at the center, I also invite you to become a member or make a donation and follow us on Instagram at Center for Fiction. Fiction is spelled normally, 4 is the number 4. Finally, to add an especially rewarding element to your support, we hope you'll return to the auditorium to buy as many door prize tickets as you can. So what's going to happen is this room will be flipped. We'll have some amazing food in here, and our Fête committee chairs will also be doing booths where you can purchase door prize tickets. The prizes tonight are incredible. Think book bundles from amazing publishers, an overnight luxury hotel stay, a one-of-a-kind behind-the-scenes experience at the American Museum of Natural History, memberships to a variety of New York cultural institutions, including this one, culinary and retail offers, and much, much more. Following a brief reset of this space, again, you can get your door prize tickets and additional food right here in the auditorium starting at 8. And if you have cash, that's welcome. We'll also have QR codes. Just remember, you have to be present to actually claim your prize, or we're giving it to someone else. So be sure to come back to the auditorium at 9:30 when our door prize drawing starts. Thank you to all of our culinary sponsors and door prize donors. I know we're like keeping you here. Thank you to all of our culinary sponsors and door prize donors, in particular, Fort Hamilton Distillery, who is running a whiskey tasting on the second floor, Peter Pan Donut and Pastry Shop, there are donuts upstairs as well, Esquina Bao Bun, who did a bao room upstairs, and Selection Masal, who graciously provided our wines tonight. Thank you as well to the incredible Fête Committee co-chairs, Pilar Garcia-Brown and Megan Leahy, and all of our Fête Committee members who worked so diligently with me and our CFF team to make this evening so spectacular. Now, enough of me and more of the party. It's my pleasure to send you off to enjoy the rest of your evening here at the center. Again, we've got literary tarot, whiskey tastings, book matchmaking here downstairs, and a dazzling full house. Enjoy.